Hello and welcome back to another one of these videos where we're ranking something that's a part of my game collection. We've done a few videos like this in the past. We've ranked all of my Nintendo Switch games, all of my PS1, 2 and 4 games, but now we're going to be doing something a little bit different by ranking all of the consoles that are a part of my collection. I do have quite a lot of consoles at this point, but there are a few that are weirdly missing. Like I don't own an SNES, and I don't actually own any Sega consoles, which is a little bit strange. At some point I would like to get a Dreamcast, to be honest, because I think that's the Sega console that stands out to me the most. But yeah, without further ado, let's get on with the list and take a look at what consoles I do actually have. You've all seen tier list videos like this before, I'm sure, so I don't really need to go into how it works. So yeah, let's crack on with it. The first console that we're going to be talking about is actually a little bit of a weird one, because it's not just one console, it's the Game & Watch systems. So with these, I actually own 3 of them. I own Donkey Kong, Snoopy Tennis, and Mario Bros. And yeah, the way that these used to work is that you would get a brand new system that just contained one game. So like the entire console was kind of like designed around playing a singular game rather than playing loads of different games like practically every other console does. So yeah, really we're not getting the list off to a good start here, because I would probably say that this is the worst console in my entire collection. Rather than us going through all 3 of the different ones that I've got, I've kind of just grouped them all into one category. So yeah, I mean, if any console is gonna go in F, I would probably say it would be this one. Like they're a novelty to play, don't get me wrong, but I mean, they don't really have a lot of substance. They don't really even have like proper screens. It's sort of like an LED screen, the way that it works. So yeah, I would probably put that in F. The next system that we're moving on to is obviously a lot more well known than that though, and it's the NES. With this one I don't actually have a like big history with this console like a lot of people do, and I actually only like reasonably recently actually got my NES. It was probably about like, I don't know, like 4 or 5 years ago now, but yeah, still don't have that many games for it. But what little I have played of the NES, it is a really good console actually. Like I've played quite a few amazing games on there. So I guess for now we're going to put this in C. Obviously the legacy of the NES is huge. Like so many big franchises started on there, like Metroid, Mario, like practically everything, Zelda. Like all of these big Nintendo franchises, the odds are they started on the NES. But it's kind of like going back to play it now, a lot of those games have somewhat dated. Like I've actually never been able to get into the original Zelda just because I always start playing it and I have no idea what I'm doing, and I just give up like straight away. Maybe I should give it more of a shot and like use a guide or something that might make it more enjoyable. But yeah, the next console is the original Game Boy, which I have a much more history with because I think this was the first handheld game device that I ever had, and I used to play this like all the time as a kid, especially with the Pokemon games. They're probably still among my most played games of all time just because of how much I played them as a kid. And obviously you had other games on there like the Mario Land games. You had Link's Awakening, which was the first Zelda game that I ever played. And yeah, some other stuff as well on there that's really good. But this is where things get a little bit complicated now, because I'm not sure whether in this list am I considering the fact that some of these other consoles have backwards compatibility. Because if I do take that into consideration, it basically makes some of these consoles completely irrelevant, right? Because like the Game Boy Advance can just play original Game Boy games, and even the Gamecube with the Game Boy player, that can play Game Boy games. So I think the way that we're going to do this list is that we are going to take backwards compatibility into consideration, because I think that makes it a little bit more interesting. And actually, if you do consider that, I would probably say that the original version of the Game Boy is in F, just because it doesn't have a backlight, and it can't play Game Boy Color or Game Boy Advance games like the Game Boy Advance can. So you're pretty limited with the library of games you have access to if you take that into consideration. Now we move on to my favourite game console of all time, the PS1. But, using the logic that we just outlined with backwards compatibility, the PS1 is actually completely irrelevant because the PS2 is fully backwards compatible with the PS1. Although, having said that, it isn't fully backwards compatible because I have had issues where the PS2 couldn't play certain PS1 games properly. The main example that I can think of right now is Ape Escape. For some reason my fat model PS2 can't play Ape Escape 1, even though my slim PS2 can. So I think for that reason, the fact that the PS2 does have some backwards compatibility issues, although they are very minor, I think that's the only game I've actually ever had trouble with, come to think of it. But just because of that, I think the PS1 still has some worth. So I'm going to put it in D. Again, not because I hate the console, but just because the PS2 pretty much completely replaces it. Now the N64 it's never had, like a console released after, has never had full backwards compatibility with it, so that makes it a little bit more valuable. And the fact it's got so many amazing games on it as well, like it's got Smash Bros, it's got Mario Party, it's got Zelda, it's got like Mario 64 obviously. So yeah, this is a pretty good console. I am actually gonna put this one in maybe... You see, the thing that puts me off of this console, and the reason that I don't particularly like collecting for it, in fact I've only got 2 games for it, is just because I hate the controller. I know that you can get third-party controllers that are supposedly a lot better, which is good, and I'll have to invest in one of them at some point. But another thing is that you can't easily upscale footage from the N64 to make it look good. Even though I've got like a pretty good upscaler, the N64 still doesn't look that great even when you use it. Probably because the N64 can only use video output from like S-Video and composite cables, whereas like the PS2 can output using component cables, which makes the quality much better. But yeah, that's a bit of a like specky reason to not like the N64. The main reason is just the controller sucks, to be honest. But even then, I've got to put it above the NES, right? I would say that the N64 is quite significantly better than the NES, so it's going to go in B for now. Might shuffle it around later, I'm not sure. But yeah, the next console is the Game Boy Color. Now, I hate to do this because I do really like the Game Boy Color, but I've got to put it in F, using the same logic that I used for the other Game Boy system, just the fact that the Game Boy Advance just completely replaces it. So yeah, that's going to go in F. The PS2, now this is where things get interesting, because I would say that the PS2 is probably one of the greatest games consoles of all time. The fact that obviously it can play PS2 games, but it's fully backwards compatible with PS1 games, apart from Ape Escape, make it just like one of my absolute go-to systems. Now, you could argue that the PS3 makes the PS2 irrelevant because the early model PS3 consoles were backwards compatible with PS1 and 2 games, but the backwards compatibility there wasn't that great. I know that it struggled to run quite a lot of PS2 games, and there's also the fact that that model of PS3 was prone to breaking a lot. So I think when I take the PS3 into consideration, I'm going to be only considering the model of PS3 that I've actually got, which is the Slim, which can't play PS2 games. So yeah, that's a bit of a like complicated thing to be saying, but yeah. The PS2, I'm going to put in S. I think that it's one of the best games consoles ever made, so it can't really go anywhere else. Now, the Game Boy Advance, I know that this is a picture of a, like, normal Game Boy Advance as opposed to the SP, but I'm going to talk about it as if it is the SP, just because that's the best version of that console. I would probably say that this is one of the best games consoles of all time. Fully backwards compatible with original Game Boy and Game Boy Color games. Obviously it can play Game Boy Advance games as well, and there's a huge library of games for that console. The one thing I guess you could say is that the original version of the DS was backwards compatible with Game Boy Advance games, but it wasn't backwards compatible with original Game Boy and Game Boy Color games. Now, the one thing here that is stopping me from putting this in, like, S rank, for example, is the fact that the Gamecube with a Game Boy player is also fully backwards compatible with all of those Game Boy titles. And plus, being able to play them on the TV, I think is better, personally. Obviously, there are advantages to having them portably as well, but yeah, I think for the reason that the Gamecube can also play all of the same games and it displays them on a TV instead of a tiny screen, I think I'm going to put the Game Boy Advance in A. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Hopefully what I said there just made sense. The original Xbox, now, I got this like when it was reasonably new, to be fair, but I never really got that many games for it. Because I liked the PS2 so much, I always got like third-party games for the PS2, which basically left me owning an Xbox just for the exclusive games. So really, you had Fable, and you had Halo 1 and 2, and you had the two Oddworld games. Outside of that, I didn't really play any Xbox games, which is a shame because the Xbox was by far the most powerful console of that generation. It also had 4 controller ports, it had a internal hard drive, so you didn't need to use memory cards. Quite ahead of its time, to be honest. It also integrated online a lot better than any of the other consoles of that generation did. So yeah, as an actual console, it is very good, but I just don't feel all that attached to any of the games that released on it. And another thing as well, I don't know whether I should even be considering this as a part of the conversation, but obviously all of those exclusive games that I just mentioned are have like remasters at this point. So like the Master Chief Collection on Xbox One basically completely replaces the original versions of Halo. Fable Anniversary, I don't know whether that one does actually replace the original. I would probably say the original is better. And then we've got the remasters of the Oddworld games as well. So it kind of leaves me with no real reason to go back to the original Xbox, outside of like really specific niche games like Super Monkey Ball Deluxe or Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2X, but they're like really specific examples. So based on that, I'm actually going to put the original Xbox in C, just because I've got no reason to go back to it, whereas the PS2, it's probably one of my most played consoles, if not my most played console of all time. So yeah, I think C is the right place for it. The GameCube, I've actually recently been like really getting into the GameCube. I've kind of like doubled my GameCube collection, which isn't really all that impressive because I only had like 5 games for it anyway. But yeah, upon like replaying or playing for the first time some of these GameCube games, I've really come to appreciate it. I think it's an amazing console, and I kind of wish that I had gotten more games for it at the time, because I did actually have a GameCube when I was a kid, so I don't know why I never like built up my library for it. I guess I was just like really into the PS2, but it's a shame because I missed out on so many amazing games. I'm going to put this one in S. I honestly think it's an amazing system. And like I say, with the Game Boy player, you've also got access to all of those portable Game Boy games as well, blown up to the TV, which is awesome. Hello there, Editing Rob here. Sorry to interrupt the video that you're watching, but I feel like I just needed to say something. First of all, I want to acknowledge the somewhat bizarre way that I'm actually ranking these consoles. When you're looking at it on a tier list like this, it kind of looks a little bit strange that I've put consoles like the PS1 so low down the list, when that's my favourite games console of all time. Obviously, I know I said at the beginning of the video that I was taking backwards compatibility into account, but still, if you was looking at this on face value, it would look a little bit strange, like I hated the PS1 or something. So yeah, I kind of apologise for the weird way that I went about making this video. Maybe I should have just have made it more straightforward by not talking about backwards compatibility, but there we go. Secondly, the other thing that I want to point out is that when I was filming this video, I actually forgot at this point, when I was talking about the Gamecube, that the Wii was backwards compatible with it. When I was editing this, I was thinking I might come across like a bit of a hypocrite because I took that into consideration with every other console, but not the Gamecube. But then I actually thought about it in a little bit more depth, and my ranking actually somewhat makes sense. You see, if you take into consideration every single one of my consoles, you've got the GameCube, the Nintendo Wii, and the Wii U, right? Now, looking at all of the games that all of those systems can play, you've got the GameCube, which can play every Game Boy game and obviously GameCube games. You've got the Wii, that can play GameCube games and obviously Wii games. And then you've got the Wii U, that can play Wii games and Wii U games. So if you could only choose two of these consoles to have in your collection, you would actually be much better off having just the GameCube and the Wii U, because that way you can play all four systems of games that those consoles can actually play. Whereas if you picked the Wii and one of the other consoles, you would only have access to three of the systems that all of these things can play. So when you actually analyse it, you're better off having a GameCube that can play Game Boy games and GameCube games, and a Wii U that can play Wii games and Wii U games. So I actually do end up standing by my ranking here, even though at the time it was literally just that I forgot that the Wii was backwards compatible. Maybe I'm just really overthinking it, and I should probably just go and let you carry on watching the video you was in the middle of, so I'll leave it at that. See you later. Obviously, in terms of backwards compatibility, that is all it has. It wasn't backwards compatible with the N64, the SNES, or the NES. But, I mean, that's fine. Like, the library that it does have is amazing and makes up for that. Now we move on to the original DS. I never actually owned a, what is this, a DS Lite, I think that's a picture of. I never actually owned that. I only ever had the original version of the DS, which had the Game Boy Advance slot. But yeah, I imagine the later models of the DS were a lot better. But still, this is an example again of a system where I just didn't really get into it all that much. I probably missed out on a ton of amazing original DS games, but I don't know, I wasn't really that into portable gaming at the time. Like, I had a PSP as well, which we're going to talk about in a minute, but again, I never really delved that much into its library. Again, what you've got to consider with the original DS as well is that the 3DS is fully backwards compatible. So again, that kinda makes the original DS kind of like defunct, doesn't it? So, original DS, again, I feel like I'm gonna have to put this in F. The only thing that the original DS has over the 3DS is that, like I say, the original model could play Game Boy Advance games, but like I said earlier, it couldn't play original Game Boy or Game Boy Color games, so that was a little bit disappointing. So again, I'm gonna have to put this one in F, just based on the fact that the 3DS completely replaces it. The PSP, no console released afterwards had full backwards compatibility with it, but the Vita did get a lot of PSP games put onto its store digitally, but I'm not going to consider that, because as we all know at this point, the Vita store could just be closed at any second. No doubt eventually that will happen, but Sony have recently gone back on that and kept it open, but that's a whole debate for another time. So the PSP. I would say I preferred the PSP to the DS at the time. If I went back to them and played them now, I probably wouldn't. I'd probably prefer the DS. But I did have a lot of fun with what little games I did play on the PSP. I played a lot of the Breath of Fire 3 port for the PSP. I know that's a PS1 game, but yeah, I had a lot of fun with it on the PSP. The PSP is where I first played the Monster Hunter games, which I really love. So yeah, I had some good times with my PSP. The Grand Theft Auto games on there were pretty good. So yeah, I would probably say that this is... it just didn't have very much, like, first-party support, though, did it? Like, there's no, like, one game where I'm thinking, like, oh yeah, that's a reason to go out and buy a PSP now. Because, like, it had, like, Metal Gear Solid Portable Ops, which has never been ported to any other consoles, so there's that, but that's not a very good game. Peace Walker was obviously ported to PS3, and it's a much superior version of the game as well, so I think just for the pure fact that it doesn't really have like that one game that you would go back to the PSP for, I feel like I've got to put it in D. Now the Xbox 360 is an interesting like era of my gaming history because I actually played the Xbox 360 as my primary console at the time, so like over the PS3. It's pretty much the only time where I've strayed from the PlayStation brand like that. So yeah, that was interesting. I think the 360 just got up to like a better start than what the PS3 did. The PS3 probably ended much stronger, but at the beginning of their lives, the PS3 basically didn't really have anything. It had like Uncharted, it had Metal Gear Solid 4, I guess it had Little Big Planet, so it's not like it didn't have anything. But I just feel like the Xbox 360, it played third-party games much better than the PS3 did, and it also had a really solid lineup of first-party titles as well, with the obvious ones being Gears of War, which was a new IP at the time, and Halo 3, which is probably among one of my favourite shooters of all time, even to this day. So yeah, and the fact that the Xbox 360 had a much better online service than what the PS3 had. So many like indie games exploded on the Xbox 360 as well. Like you had like Limbo, Spelunky, Braid, Fez. Like all of these things were huge because of the 360. So yeah, for that reason, I'm gonna actually rank the 360 quite high. Again, the Xbox One does have backwards compatibility with 360 games, as does the Series X, but it's not full backwards compatibility, and I wouldn't trust it to run the games properly. So for that reason, I'm kind of going to disregard the backwards compatibility element a little bit for this one, just because it's not full. I'm gonna put the 360 in A, to be honest, because I do think it's deserving of a really high rank. Like I said with the PS3, it didn't get off to the best start, but it did end really well. Like obviously by the end of the PS3's life, you had games like The Last of Us coming out, you had games like Uncharted 2 had already come out, you had like a new God of War game, you had like all sorts, there was loads. I'm struggling to think of games off the top of my head right now, but yeah, there was a lot. There was Sly 4, you had obviously all of the Ratchet and Clank games, so yeah, there was a lot of stuff to be liking about the PS3. So yeah, I'm gonna put the PS3 in the same rank as the Xbox 360, to be honest. Obviously, later towards the PS3's life, you also had the implementation of trophies, which basically just copied the Xbox 360 achievements, and that was another big thing during that generation of games. But as well, another pretty big advantage that the PS3 had over the 360 is that you didn't need to pay for the online service, which was really good. The online service wasn't anywhere near as good, but the fact it was free made it very appealing. Also, the fact the PS3 was a Blu-ray player is a pretty big deal. It was the first console to do that, so that was nice. But moving on, we had the other console that was a part of that generation with the Nintendo Wii. Again, this is one where I don't have that much history with it. And I'm actually going to make this quick. I'm just going to put the Wii in F because the Wii U is fully backwards compatible with it. So I guess we'll talk more about the Wii library later. The 3DS, now I think that this is an absolutely amazing console. It's fully backwards compatible with the original DS, and this is one of the reasons that I am into Nintendo now. I actually got into Nintendo with the 3DS and the Wii U, so I was very late to the party on that. But yeah, the amount of games on the 3DS that are just like amazing. Like, you've got the definitive versions of Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. You've got Mario Kart 7, which I actually think is really underrated. You've got like the Metroid Samus Returns remake. You've got way too many to just reel off. You've got Animal Crossing New Leaf. Like, there's so many good games on the 3DS now, it's insane. So yeah, I'm gonna put the 3DS in... I'm almost tempted, to put this one in S rank. Do I do that? Do I do that? It's got a store where you can buy like SNES games and like NES games as well. Oh, yeah, you know what? Yeah, I'm gonna put it in S. I don't see why not. There's not really any particular flaw with it. Like, you could say that the 3D effect was really gimmicky, which is true, and I never really liked the 3D element of it, but you can turn it off, and like all of the games can just be played normally, so it's absolutely fine. You could also say that the fact it didn't have a right analog stick, like, prevented it from getting that many ports from like you could get like PS2 era ports for it, like, ideally. But the later models did have the C stick, which kind of functioned exactly like a right analog stick anyway, so that's not really that much of a valid criticism. So yeah, I think it's really good. Probably the best handheld console ever made, depending on whether you count the Switch as being handheld or whether it's a home console. But yeah. The PlayStation Vita is one of the newest games consoles I've added to my collection, and while it is good as a console, it just doesn't have any games, does it? Like, I've been looking at like the best Vita games, and none of them look particularly good. Like, there's not that many, and none of them are particularly like great. Like, you've got the Little Big Planet game that's exclusive to the Vita. You've got the Uncharted game, you've got Wipeout, but I'm pretty sure that version of Wipeout was remastered for PS4, so that doesn't really count. And outside of that, I can't really think of anything else. So, despite it being a really good console in terms of the actual console, and what it's capable of, they just never gave it the opportunity to really shine, did they? So, I'm gonna put it in D. There's not really... I can't put it in the same rank as the NES or the Xbox because they had far more games available on them. So, yeah, it kinda has to just go in D by default. It can play PS1 games portably if you buy them on the store, which is nice. But again, like I was saying earlier, it was only like last week or something that they were saying that they were going to take the PlayStation Vita store offline. So the fact that it's that fragile kind of makes me want to just disregard the digital store entirely, because one day it's going to disappear and then that's not going to be a factor anymore. So yeah, we'll leave it in D. Then we've got the Wii U. Like I said earlier, the Wii U is the like home console that really got me invested in Nintendo. And I actually think that I will defend the Wii U. Obviously, the Switch is better, right? Like, I think everybody will agree with that. But at the time, when we didn't have the Switch, the Wii U was really good. I don't know why it was getting slated all the time. It had so many good games on it, all of which pretty much have been ported to the Switch now, so it kind of makes it irrelevant. But at the time, you had stuff like Splatoon, you had Mario Kart 8, you had the Wind Waker and Twilight Princess remasters, you had Breath of the Wild, technically, as well. So yeah, you had so many good games. You had Mario 3D World as well. You had Pikmin 3. So it's weird how that console is considered a failure, considering how many amazing games were put onto it. Now, the one issue with this is that, like I just said, pretty much every worthwhile Wii U game has been ported to the Switch or has gotten a sequel for the Switch. So I'm kind of left thinking, well, what are the exclusive games for the Wii U at the moment? You've got Nintendo Land, I guess. You've got, for now, the Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD remasters are exclusive to the Wii U, but probably won't be for very long. I imagine they're going to get ported to the Switch probably this year, but we'll see. So yeah, there's not that much of a reason to really get the Wii U anymore. But then what you've got to remember is that the Wii U is fully backwards compatible with the Wii. And this is probably some of the best backwards compatibility that I've ever seen as well, because not only does it just play the Wii games, but also you use all of the same Wii peripherals, and it also completely replicates the Wii-like interface as well. So it's almost like the Wii U literally has a Wii console inside of it. It's not just like emulating it. So I think that's really cool. Like you could even access the Wii's store, like the original Wii store you could go to by accessing the Wii dashboard. So yeah, that was really cool. And for that reason, I think the Wii U still has a lot of worth today, because it's basically a Wii, but with a HDMI output, which makes it look slightly better. And you've got the added bonus of it also being a Wii U, so if you wanted to play any Wii U games, you can do that. So for that reason, I think the Wii U still has quite a lot of worth even today, so for that reason it's still worth getting. Now, taking that into consideration, you've also got the massive library of Wii games at your disposal. So you've got Mario Kart Wii, you've got Mario Galaxy 1 and 2, you've got Mario Party, although the Wii Mario Party games aren't that great. You've got Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Come to think of it, you've also got Super Smash Bros. For Wii U, which is still a Wii U exclusive, but it's pretty much been completely like taken over by Ultimate at this point. But yeah, so for that reason, the fact that it's also a Nintendo Wii, I think that pushes it really high up the rank. I am. Oh, do I put it in A? Do I do it? I think so. I think we put it in A. Because although I know I've not been taking the digital store into consideration because of everything that I just said, like one day it's going to be completely taken offline, what I will give the Wii U credit for is that the store on the Wii U is insanely good. Like, not only do you have access to like loads of like modern games, like indie stuff like Shovel Knight and whatever, but you also have a huge virtual console. The biggest virtual console that Nintendo has ever done. You've got access to like original DS games, Wii games, NES games, SNES games, N64 games, like literally pretty much the entire like console, Nintendo console history is there represented on the Wii U store. So yeah, I do think because of how good that is, I do think I want to consider that for the Wii U. Plus, there's also the fact that there's never been any mention of the Wii U store being taken offline yet. So yeah, I hope it doesn't get taken offline anytime soon, because it really is good. So yeah, I think taking that into consideration as well, I definitely think that that's an A rank. Now we move on, finally. That was a huge rant about the Wii U. We move on to the PS4. Now, the thing is with the PS4 is that it's obviously a really good console and has a huge library of absolutely amazing games, but the PS5 has just completely replaced it because it's fully backwards compatible. There's only like I think there was like maybe 10 games that weren't playable on the PS5 that were PS4 games. So that's pretty impressive, and for that reason, I've got to put the PS4 in F. The one game it does have is PT, but again, you need to have downloaded that already when it first came out in order to have access to it. So that's not really relevant. So yeah, that's weird, because I feel like the PS4 is still kind of new, and yet I'm ranking it that low. But it's just because the PS5 not only is backwards compatible with the PS4 library, but it also upscales a lot of them. It makes them run at a higher frame rate. So it basically plays PS4 games better than what the PS4 did, which is interesting, because most of the time with backwards compatibility, it doesn't play them as well as the original hardware does. So I think the PS5 is really the first time that they've gone all out with backwards compatibility, where like in some cases it feels like you're playing a remaster of a PS4 game, but you're not. It's just the original version that's being upscaled and is running better than it ever has before. So yeah, that's very impressive. That's something that I really like about the PS5. But we're not talking about that yet. We're talking about the Xbox One. Now, as with most of the Xbox consoles, I never really got into this. It had the Master Chief Collection, it had Sunset Overdrive, it had that Recore game, it had a lot of games that I don't really care about, like it had Crackdown 3, it had probably a ton of Gears of War games, but it just feels to me like with the Xbox One, Microsoft never really pushed it that much. They never really had that many exclusive games that were all that varied. They all felt like shooters. In fact, I'm pretty sure that every single one of the games that I just mentioned is a shooter, right? Like the Halo collection, Gears of War, Recore, Sunset Overdrive, Gears of War. I don't remember if I just said that or not. But yeah, every single one of those games are shooters. So that's kind of the problem with the Xbox 360, with the Xbox One even. Just didn't have that variety. So it's a fine enough console, but I feel like... Oh, and as well, another thing I guess you could consider here is that the Xbox Series X, I'm pretty sure, is like fully backwards compatible with the Xbox One, right? Like I think it's a similar situation between the PS5 and PS4, but unlike that situation, I don't actually have an Xbox Series X, so I guess I can't consider that personally. But even then, I'm going to put it in D, just because it doesn't have any games, or it doesn't have any games that appeal to me anyway. So yeah, I don't even really know why I have an Xbox One, to be honest. The Nintendo Switch, one of the best consoles ever made. Easily one of the best consoles ever made. I'm putting that straight in S. The fact that it's a proper home console and a portable console in one is such a good idea, and it actually works so well as well. Probably, as everybody knows at this point. I mean, who doesn't have a Switch at this point? But yeah, just the amount of technology that's in the Joy-Cons alone, like the fact it's got the HD rumble, the fact you can detach it from the console and just play it like completely removed, the fact you can use each individual Joy-Con as its own controller, it's got gyro, it's got an IR sensor, like there is a lot of technology packed into those controllers. So that's another impressive element of it. But the most important thing here is that the Switch has a lot of really high caliber, amazing games. Like, not only does it have the games that are exclusive to the Switch, like Mario Odyssey and Splatoon 2, right? But it's also got all of those Wii U ports that are probably the definitive way of playing the game just because it's on a better console. So you've got like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, you've got Pikmin 3 Deluxe, you've got just all of these games that are just like amazing. Like you've got Breath of the Wild as well, that's another huge one. And it isn't really showing any signs of slowing down either, because you've got the Skyward Sword remaster coming out, you've got a new Mario Golf, you've got Metroid Prime 4 that's somewhere out there, you've got Breath of the Wild 2, like, and who knows what Nintendo are going to announce like later in the year as well. There could be something completely out of left field. Then there's also the fact that you can play a selection of NES and SNES games on there as well if you're a member of the online service, which is pretty cool, although I will admit that that service is pretty lackluster when you compare it to the Wii U's store. And you've just got really heavy support from indie devs as well. Like, the Nintendo Switch is the place to be if you're an indie game, right? Like, it's just far more suited to indie stuff than any of the other consoles are. So yeah, easily one of the best consoles ever made, in my opinion. So yeah, then we move on to the PS5. We're kind of too early in the PS5's life to properly rank it, I feel, because I feel like it's unfair for me to sit here and say like, oh well, it doesn't really have any games. Because of course it doesn't. It's only just come out. We're not even. It's not even a year old, and it does have quite a lot of games coming out in the not so distant future. Like, we've already got the new Horizon game. We've got a new God of War. We've got the new Ratchet and Clank. We've got the new Resident Evil that's coming out really soon. Like, we've got quite a lot of stuff to be looking forward to with the PS5. So I don't feel like I can sit here and say it doesn't have any games, so it's got to go in D rank or something. Plus, there's the whole thing that I was talking about earlier, where it's fully backwards compatible with PS4 games. Not only being backwards compatible, but playing them better than what the PS4 could. So I almost feel like for that reason alone, it's got to surpass what I would have put the PS4 at, and I probably would have put the PS4 at like maybe like B rank, I guess. But I'm gonna put the PS5. I think the right place to put the PS5 is in A rank for now. Maybe down the line it could even be an S rank, depending on like how much it gets support from first-party titles, like the variety in first-party titles as well. That's always important. But yeah, for the moment, it is a little bit of a shame that we don't have any more, like, big exclusives. The only exclusive PS5 game that I have any interest in at all that's out at the moment is Demon's Souls. And that's a remake of a PS3 game that I've already played, so it's debatable as to whether that even counts. But yeah, I just feel like I can't really say that and feel justified in saying it, because it's such a new console that we've not really given it enough of a chance to properly say that it's not got any games. But yeah, the last console isn't technically a console, and this is probably going to be the most difficult one to rank out of all of them, and it's the PC. So PC gaming, there was a very brief time when I was like probably a young teenager where PC gaming was like the main thing I did. I think it might have been maybe when the Xbox 360 was like brand new, I got really into PC games. But other than that, I've never really been into PC gaming, and I feel like it's extremely finicky. Like, so many older PC games just don't work. You can't get physical PC games anymore, kind of. The odd one comes out, but it's not like a mainstream thing anymore. I mean, most modern PCs probably don't even have disk drives to play physical games, right? It just Like, I'm kind of out of the loop with it, so I don't want to say something that's completely wrong, but I just feel like there's a lot of hassle with playing PC games, especially if you're someone like me that wants to play a lot of older stuff. But obviously then you've got the other side of the coin, which is that if you do have a really high-end PC, you can play any, like, third-party games that are released on PC, obviously, and you can play them better than what any console can. Like, the graphics are better, the frame rate is better, literally everything about the games looks better. But I just feel like companies nowadays don't put a lot of effort into the PC ports to properly take advantage of that. So I'm not sure. And then there's also the element where, like, if you want to get into VR, the PC is the way to go, because, like, every single high-end VR headset is only on PC, right? So it's got that going for it as well. It's also got the fact that, like, there's so many, like, indie games that you can only play on PC that will probably never get console releases. There's also the element of PC gaming that you could choose to consider, which is the fact that it can emulate practically any older console, and especially with the really old ones, it can emulate them pretty much perfectly as well. But do you take that into consideration with PC or not? Because that's technically not, like, official. So yeah, this is why I'm saying that the PC is a difficult one to properly rank, because there's so many different elements of PC gaming. It's not as simple as a proper console. So you've got that thing where, like, because it can play, like, so many different generations of games, and it can play them better than what consoles can in a lot of cases, that surely by default would make it an S rank. But then I would argue that it's not, because in order to do that you need to get, like, such specific components to actually build your PC and make it good enough to actually be able to do that, and it's so expensive as well that it just isn't like something that's, like, obtainable for the everyday person, right? So based on that, I'm going to put PC gaming in B, right? Just because it's a hassle to get a lot of games working on it. There's so many different, like, services that you need to download now as well that make it complicated. Like, you've got Steam, you've got the Epic Store, you've got did for a while did Ubisoft have their own store as well? It was somebody like Ubisoft that did that. But yeah, it's a bit of a hassle, put it that way. So I think because of that, I'm going to put it in B. But yeah, that's every single one of my consoles ranked. This video feels like it's been extremely rambly, and I apologise for that. I hope that you found some entertainment in what I've been saying, and found some interesting stuff out about my history with games as well. Let me know if you agree with my ranking in the comments, and let me know what things you would put in the S rank category as well. Like, what are your favourite games consoles of all time? And yeah, if you enjoyed this video, give it a like, subscribe to see more stuff like this coming soon, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!